Welcome in, folks. Welcome in. Welcome in. Episode 85 of Vor Verticals podcast here. This is the pre-show, if you will, the time of the show where we allow folks who are about to be tuning in or want to tune in live here on YouTube may do so. Give you guys some time to jump in. We'll start in about 3 minutes or so. Going to make sure that the tweets are out, letting people know that we are live, and they are. Of course, we'll be recording this on Spotify as well. So hopefully everyone's having a good day. Don't see anyone live chat yet. Just to prove we are live, I'm going to put something in the chat. Of course, this is not going to be, by the way, on the Spotify version. This is only on YouTube only. So if you're listening on YouTube, you're going to get some, I guess exclusive content here. I guess we'll put it in this monkey move. This excuse me, this monkey with a wrench. I guess we'll do that. There we go. He is in the live chat. Of course, I'm going to put down. Put down, making sure you, of course, you subscribe and like the stream and whatnot. So there's a little message there. Again, do this show on Tuesdays and Thursdays around 2 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time. That's going to be the standard, at least for a while. Now, of course, it could easily change. Now, we don't have a set schedule, if you will. It's just the time I prefer to do it. Of course, you can do the show later in the evening or earlier in the morning. We'll say here on the pre-show, as again, we'll be starting here formally at 2:30. Was originally wanted to do the show a little bit earlier today, in light of what happened this weekend and some of the things that transpired, especially with the Andor situation. Of course, if that's one of the main topics here on the show today. Was going to do the show, or at least get it started a little bit earlier today, but the apartment complex I am living at, they do every single spring a check of the emergency alert system, sprinklers and stuff like that, which is totally fine, right? You got to make sure those things are doing well, and everything looks fine. So that was happening today, at least for our building, and I didn't want to subjugate you guys to me doing a live show and then having the maintenance people come in and then the emergency alerts going off and things like that, and just would have not been a good experience to have that happen live, let alone having other people in the building or other people in my apartment. So in light of that, figured we'll just do the show normal time we usually have it. And they're done. They finished that earlier today. So for those of you who are wondering, and it is 2:30, so we gave you guys about 3 minutes to hop in. And we're going to begin the recording of the audio-only version, and we'll get started today. I think I have a good show. If you can tell by the show title, a bit morbid, a bit of a downer title, but it'll work out just fine. Okay, so we're going to get the stream started here in 3, 2, or get the show started in 3, 2, 1. Welcome in to the Vor Verticals podcast episode 85. Again, getting ever so closer to the 100 episode mark. We're not there just yet, but I guarantee you, I shouldn't say guarantee, but hopefully by the time we get to like Memorial Day weekend or week of Memorial Day, we'll hopefully be at the 100 show mark, which, by the way, for those of you who don't know, that is, at least in the days of, TV shows back in, I say back in the day, but usually that is the magic number for syndication, meaning you can have shows consistently play back, right? You can have shows that were previously aired, air them over again. But anyway, that out of the way, or enough of that. Well, first of all, welcome to the show. Now we might be getting some new viewers in here, hopefully. Of course, this is a big show because we are going to be openly discussing something that happened over the weekend involving this Andor leak. Of course, the show's premiering soon at the end of the month. I will dive into that. It's not the opening topic of the show. I was close to making the opening topic, but of course we are a college ball show at heart. So we have to talk about college ball first, which is the policy I have, and it's certainly the policy the show will have going forward most of the time. And, of course, the main topic here is going to be, is college football dead? A lot of chatter about that in the past couple of days, and certainly with the House ruling stuff and, all these changes. And, of course, we just came off of the first year and the of course, this year being the last year of the 12-team playoff, at least the current model. Just some thoughts on where we are in college football and is it dead, and the reasons for it and the reasons against it. We'll dive into that. Of course, the Andor controversy. Yeah, that happened this weekend, and I'm sure a lot of you guys would want me to explain my reasoning. And of course, we have one more topic here. The big topics is, what are the big brands of college football? Bit of a question these days. I think some folks, especially who are newer to the sport, because we know, or at least I understand, a lot of folks are new to the sport, especially our younger audience or the younger audience in general for college football, especially now with the video game being back. I think a lot of folks who are younger of age will be playing the video game and then be introduced to the world of college football. And, of course, they'll probably wonder a lot of these questions. And I think one of them is probably, what are the big brands? A lot of them are obvious, but I think some of them are not so much, at least anymore, to an extent. Then we'll get into our rapid fire Q&A towards the end of the show. Again, if you are new here, make sure you subscribe. That's all we're asking for. It keeps the show free. You don't have to put this on a paywall or on a Patreon or anything. It keeps it free. All this intel and thoughts and whatnot are completely free to you. It's on YouTube, so if you have an account, Google account, internet, phone, pretty simple. I think most of you are listening to that either through those methods, if you are listening. Then make sure you subscribe and like the stream. That's all we're asking. You don't have to turn on notifications. Personally, I don't. But if you want to really, really make sure you catch a live show when we go live, then that's your way of doing it. I'm not recommending that, nor am I, advocating for you to do so. It's up to you. But what we are advocating is for you to subscribe, and like the streams, videos. Of course, we do live shows. We have the audio versions on Spotify. If we can't go live, then we will sometimes record ahead, like an evergreen type show, and then we will, of course, let you guys know beforehand. But usually, about 99% of the time, we are going to have shows that are live. Now, again, with summer coming up, I'm sure a lot of you, including me, will be traveling. If that were to happen, which I think it will, we will have either several or a couple of shows pre-recorded, and it'll be sort of evergreen type shows. So mostly probably end up being Q&A mostly. And so I'll let you guys know that ahead of time if we do that. But these shows are mostly live. And, of course, the Spotify version will come out either the evening of us doing the live show or after, before we do the next one. And, of course, like I said, we do these on Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe an occasional Friday special, especially as we get into summer. I know last summer, we'll see if it holds true this summer, but we did 3 shows a week, mostly to get through the team projection segments because we had so many teams to cover. But since we were 1 year into this almost, and now we're able to spread it out, and we're going to be, starting those, soon. We're going to be starting our team projection segments soon, and we'll be doing 2 teams per show, a lot of teams, and we'll be starting those. We're not going to start those too early because you can't do them too early enough to where you're starting them like in January and February. But I think May, especially if we're getting close to Memorial Day, is a good time to start that. Of course, that's around magazine time. The magazines coming out, like the Feel Steel and the Lindsay stuff and things like that. Brett McMurphy puts out some stuff too. So around that time, we'll usually get into that. But long monologue aside here, let's actually get into the show here. We'll need some water real quick, and then we'll hop right in. So the topic I hinted at here, and starting the show finally after 9 minutes on YouTube and I guess a couple minutes on Spotify here. But let me ask you guys this question. This is a question that I have pondered to myself a little bit. Some folks who I've talked to off the record have sort of lightly brought this up. Is sort of this. It's is college football dead? Like, is the sport dead? Is it dying? Is it losing interest? Are people not motivated into watching college football anymore as they were 10 years ago? And look, I mean, of course, I'll go over my reasons for, reasons against that statement. Of course, we don't have access to the analytical data and the numerical data. That's very important. Those are key factors into determining if viewership numbers are falling off. And of course, some of these major networks like ABC via Disney, CBS, Warner Brothers, Fox, those various entities can put out those numbers publicly, but without putting a rolling snapshot of, I guess, the last 10 years of has viewership declined. Instead of boring guys with numbers and stuff, I figured, why not just do some qualitative information? Of course, qualitative meaning quality, more words and stuff, whereas quantitative is, of course, numerical stuff. And if you're a communication major like me, you are aware of those words. If you're not, then you just learn something new. So I'm going to give you guys some sort of qualitative reasons as to for that statement being true and reasons why I would say no. Then I'll give you guys my formal opinion on that. So the reasons for college football being dead, that statement being, if someone were to believe that. The first one for me, if I were to put a list here, the first one definitely be conference realignment. Now you're going to see conference realignment, spoiler here, twice, so you'll see it and the reasons for and the reasons against it, the sport being dead. Conference realignment, at least in the negative here, is the loss of regionality and traditions. Of course, we have seen conferences go away, Pac-12, at least in the traditional sense. Now, of course, it's coming back at some point in the near future, and of course, it's not going to look the same anymore because a lot of those schools have moved elsewhere. Regionality is slowly going away as we sort of move into this model of, the sort of college ball's AFC, NFC model being the SEC, Big Ten, or whatever those are going to be in the future. Of course, the Big Ten name really has no meaning anymore, just in tradition, because there's more than 10 teams now. So are they going to change the name at some point? I don't know. The SEC will probably also maybe have its name reconfigured, or at least the meaning of it will be different. Of course, it already is different. So yes, that part of it hurts a little bit. And of course, like me, someone who grew up in sort of the tail end of college ball's prime. Of course, a lot of folks believe 07, 08, 09 was sort of the peak of college football, and of course, the early 2000s, 2010s, sort of was the downfall, or the very slow downfall, I guess. And I still believe, at least in my lifetime of being a college football fan who is able to remember certain seasons, I still believe 2014 is the best season I've ever experienced. I know a lot of you guys will laugh at that, but I believe 2014 was a real sweet spot of us. I explained this, weeks ago about, it's the sweet spot of the beginning of the 2014 or the 14 playoff era, and then sort of the tail end of the BCS era. Still had that same feel to the BCS because we hadn't experienced the playoff yet, so it felt like the BCS era, but also didn't. It wasn't. Anyway, just that lost regionality and tradition, of course, with conference realignment comes the losing of several rivalries. Now, we still have some, Washington State and Washington will still play. Oregon State are still going to play, but we lost Bedlam. Oklahoma State, Oklahoma will not be played anymore unless they, for some reason, schedule or get scheduled in the bowl game, which will not happen because if you recall, Texas and Texas A&M had several opportunities to meet each other in a bowl game, and those schools were, one side said no, the other side was willing to, and it was a whole mess, and ultimately the bowl scheduling committee made it apparent to never schedule those teams together. Of course, they never scheduled each other either non-conference, but we lost Bedlam. Oklahoma State, Oklahoma will not play each other anymore. It's a shame. If I were, by the way, to do, let's say, a college football 25, or I guess this year college football 26 dynasty in the video game, if I were playing as Oklahoma or Oklahoma State in the non-conference when you're making your schedule, I would 100% make sure I would play Oklahoma State or Oklahoma, vice versa, because it's tradition, it's reverent. I think it's a shame it went away, and it's probably never going to come back, at least for a while, unless Oklahoma State were to join the SEC, and then of course we would have it again. But anytime soon, it coming back is unlikely, and it sucks. So that's one of it. Another one, poor calendar. This one is going to get some blowback. I've had some people tell me they agree with me, they hate the calendar, and this is more on par with several folks like, Josh Pate, those guys, sort of like him, who have been sort of sounding the alarm, if you will, of, just the calendar is bad with, recruiting, the transfer window opening up in December. Of course, if you're a college football playoff team, you have that on top of making the playoff. Then you have coaching turnover of guys being hired by other staffs, and it's just the whole month of December is a disaster. It didn't have to be that way, but it is. The calendar of having the national championship game all the way in late January on Martin Luther King Day. Of course, this past year was that in the inauguration, which played a role in folks just not paying attention to the national title. That didn't help. And unfortunately, every 4 years, if this continues, we'll have that problem. And I've had some blowback too about that. And some folks off the record have, mentioned, hey, it's not too bad. At least we're getting, a smaller gap in between, the national championship and then spring ball coming up, which is true. And I think that's the big positive, or the only positive. That is that, yes, it does it makes the gap smaller in between the national title being played and then spring practices happening. But then again, it stretches the season. And I think that's the reason why you're seeing a lot of these schools move away from a traditional, spring game, is because there's no reason of having it if you're going to have a big season coming up. And, what's the whole point of having one? Now, of course, part of that leads into the injury situation, which I totally agree with Josh Payton. It's like, okay, you're having a spring game and, guys will get injured. So what? I mean, what? We're not having a spring game because you don't want guys injured. So what? Like, if people are watching the player, like all of a sudden he gets hurt even more, or does the chances go higher? Like, okay, so fans have magical powers that can happen. Anyway, the calendar is a mess. It doesn't have to be like that. Cultural playoff expansion, another thing I don't like, or I would consider criteria for at least making the argument for the sport being dead, or at least a reason why you would think that. The expansion, yes, I hate it. Yes, does it loosen the value of the regular season? Does it make it to where there's no more urgency of, we lose another game, no big deal, we'll be okay? Now, again, I know folks will detest on that. They'll use the argument, but in the NFL is just like that. It's, you go 1-6 in the NFL, and it's like, well, that's fine for the NFL. Those are professional players. But in college football, one of the things I liked about the 14 playoff, one of the things I really liked about the BCS is that there was urgency. Like, if you lost one game or two games, your hopes of making it to wherever the championship is being held were slim, or making the playoff were slim. And I think that's really, really cool that there was that urgency to win every single game, and every single game had value in terms of winning it. And just not to mention the playoff expansion, now you're going to have even more games of the playoff implications on it. But then again, a normal person like me will want to watch Texas A&M versus Texas because it's a good rivalry. It doesn't matter if there's playoff implications or anything like that. I don't care about that. The postseason of college football should not be where the sport revolves around. Now, for college basketball, that's a little bit different. Okay, that's more of a different animal there. But for college football, it should be the regular season. It should be Saturdays in the fall. Shouldn't matter, and that's where their sport should revolve around instead of the postseason. That's just me. I know it sounds like, old man yelling on a cloud, but that's just the way I feel about it. And I think the way the sport's going, we're slowly, and I know some folks will tell me, well, it's not like that right now. You're right. But who's to say in 5 or so years from now, it may not be a problem now, but in about 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, it could be a problem. Same thing with players sitting out of bowl games. It's not happening right now in the playoff, but I guarantee you, you're going to see one player do it at some point, whether it's, for some of these on-campus playing games, if you will, or whatever. I guess with the new model coming up, I guess there'll be even more of those. Like, who's to say a player who is going to have a high draft stock, let's say they're going to be a future top 10 pick, and they are playing, I don't know, a game against, one of these G5s. We're still letting G5s in the playoff. Who's to say they can't say, you know what, we're playing a G5, we feel pretty good about it, I'm not going to play it because I don't want to get hurt. I'm telling you, while that sounds crazy, and I'm sure a lot of you are probably yelling at me right now, well, that's never going to happen. Oh, no one said that about, everyone said that about the bowl games, even the BCS and the New Year's Six bowl games, and then let alone one guy gets hurt, and I think it was Jalen Smith, I believe, or whoever his name was for Notre Dame, gets hurt, and the bowl game against Ohio State, I believe, and then everyone is, jumping up in arms saying, players should not play in bowl games, especially if you're a top 5 draft pick. So what? Now you're a top 5 draft pick, and all of a sudden that magically makes it worse for you to get hurt? Like, it's a sport. Like, it's just like me getting out of bed this morning. I could easily get hurt. I get fall off my bed. So what? Like I shouldn't get off my bed? Just the that alone is just the playoff expansion has been a big reason for that, and that's a whole other issue too. But playoff expansion, yes, that's a big reason why people would think that way. Number one, TV networks, of course, everyone views them as a villain here. Part of that ties into playoff expansion and ties in all of this really. Playoff expansion, the calendar, just the way the sports structure now, conference realignment, the transfer market. Certainly a thing I could understand people being upset about the sport right now, not liking it. The fact that you don't have the traditional team anymore. You just have basically a team of individuals or a group of individuals. It's not a team. It's a group of individuals. You no longer have this, building a relationship with a, certain recruiting class or a certain group of players. Now it's just, this, and for example, I don't know, I'm just using again, this is nothing I've heard or anything, but just a pie in the sky example. Just look at Cam Coleman at Auburn. Cam Coleman, 5-star kid. He was up there with Ryan Williams or Jeremiah Smith. A lot of people forget that he was. Trust me, a lot of folks in the recruiting industry, or at least follow it, believe he was clearly up there with these guys, and in some cases even better in some ways. And he's at Auburn. The situation was what it was last year. Quarterback was garbage. Who's to say at some point he may leave? It doesn't get any better for him. He goes elsewhere and he does well. Just name a school. I don't know, like Michigan or Ohio State, whatever. That's the problem with the portal. It's just that you don't get attached to some of these either individual players as a fan or just individual recruiting classes. And I think that's really devalued the way we view some of these recruits. Again, go back to like 10 years ago. Some of these big time recruits like, Eddie Jackson at Alabama, Byron Coward at Auburn. Obviously those guys didn't pan out, but guys like, PJ Williams at Florida State, the whole entire Florida State 2013 team, that was made of a whole bunch of, top 5 recruiting classes. And then Jimbo was a coach there. And just that attachment's not there anymore because those guys could leave if, they only get enough money or they're unhappy or they're mad. Just a whole – that in itself to me is another reason why, in my opinion, the sport just – you could at least make the argument for the sport being dead. And that's certainly a good – that's not – those aren't things I would necessarily disagree with. Now, for things against that argument – people are still going to watch. Duh, that's obvious, right? Again, if I had the numerical data with me, the analytical data, the sort of quantitative data with me, I could show you that, but I don't have that. I don't have access to that, at least a lot of it. And people still watch. Of course, I'm still going to watch. I may not like all of it. It's sort of like, we've been saying about the Marvel films, right? If you watch, people will say, oh, man, MCU's falling off. And it's, oh, man, it's going so bad. I mean, people will still watch. You'll see people go watch, the new movies will come out and they may not be good all the time. Go look at Captain America: Brave New World. Sure, it's a terrible movie, but people are still interested. They're still going to at least watch it once. May not come back and see it again, but another reason here: talent's better than ever. Well, that is true, and yes, we are seeing a lot of good talent. This past recruiting class, especially at receiver, was uber talented. But then again, I caution you: if the transfer portal. Some of those guys, at least not all, most of the cases, but some of them, not all those players will stick around. They'll move around. And then the other one, again, this one's a blessing and a curse, but to me it's more of a blessing, and that's revenue sharing. That's going to be coming at some point. Players being able to, give money, of course, getting the piece of the pie from the bringing TV contracts and whatnot, and being able to get paid. That's good. And then the other one, it's conference realignment. The good part of it, which is the having a good slate of games every single week, especially when we get in the conference play. Like this past season and this coming up season, because again, the SEC schedule is largely the same because it's the schedules from last year are the same, just the venues will change. So if you played a team at home, you'll play them on the road this year, and then vice versa. And I think the SEC that paid dividends last year, and I think the schedule in the conference was good. The fact that we had Oklahoma and Texas in there, and now it's no more divisions and. That part of it I do like. At least I'm having good games a week, and there's no more divisions anymore. We're not having to, force ourselves, to watch a 8-4 Wisconsin play 12-0 Ohio State and get sacrificed back in the old division format in the Big Ten, and it was like this in the ACC too. But now that's not the case anymore, and that's great. But my own opinion on this, and we'll move on here to the main topic. I'm sure most of you are here watching. Do I think the sport's dead? No. Do I think college ball is dead? No. Do I think there's issues with it? Of course there's issues with it. There's no it's not going to be perfect. As they say, nothing's a fairy tale land. Nothing's perfect. Do I wish things were back to where they were, let's say 10 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever? Yes. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I wish we hadn't expanded the playoff. We can't go back down now because the only way we can go forward is up, increasing it. It's like if you were to remodel a building, you don't just destroy the building, a $1 billion skyscraper. No, you don't destroy the building, you renovate it. And that's what they're doing to the playoff. They're renovating it. May not like the changes, but they're renovating it. You can't destroy the whole building. And you can't destroy the playoff because it's already there. You're going to sacrifice billions of dollars? So, no, the sport's not dead. Is there clear issues? Yes. And it sucks, but look, I'll still watch it. There's things I do like about it, but it's not perfect. It's not perfect, but I think that's important now, especially with YouTube being a thing and podcasting, that we have our voices heard. And I think a lot of these folks, the TV execs and some of these high-level and prominent people, this is something that sort of echoing what Josh Pitt has said before, is that they're listening to you. They are aware these are points that you're making, and whether or not they acknowledge those points or even legitimately actually listen to you, I don't know what I just said, remains to be seen. So I'm going to get some water real quick here, and this is certainly the topic that most of you guys are waiting to hear from me about. It's the Andor stuff, so we'll dive into that here in just a second. By the way, we have two people watching here. I think one of them is actually myself, because I have the actual stream pulled up. But if you are one of the two people who are watching this and you're new here, you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so. It's free. Like I said at the beginning of the show, it's completely free. Nothing happens. It's not behind the paywall, or you have to pay me through like a Patreon page or something. It's completely free. Just subscribe. It keeps the show free. And, I think we do a good job here. Again, we're not the best show. We're not the oldest show. We're newer, but look, it keeps it free. And, we want to get ourselves out there. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of that. At least to a certain extent. Of course, the numbers aren't going to be always great. And, of course, the analytical data, numbers from at least the stuff I have access to through the channel, it's not the best, but it's okay. Like, as long as we're having fun here, I'm having fun. That's all that matters, right? Okay, wow. Here it is. There's the topic. So, this past weekend, Josh over at Den of Nerds, someone who I look up to a lot, one of my favorite YouTubers to watch, especially for Marvel content. He's great. Tune into most of his live streams when I can, either live or on the replay. So he dropped some news last week, and it's not related to this, but I believe it is connected to this. That he got some information about, Ahsoka Season 2 and the Mandalorian Grogu movie, and some of the stuff going on around Star Wars right now. He dropped a separate video about that this time last week. It appears that same source also mentioned to him some stuff about Andor. Now, just to clarify here, this may or may not be in the actual show, though I would suggest it probably is, based on the fact that if it is the same source that has given him information in the past and it has ultimately became true, I would assume this is probably true, and this will probably, or at least it's probably going to still be in the actual show. And what I'm referring to is, and look, the whole situation about the thing that is being introduced in Andor Season 2 is something that people on YouTube, or at least on platforms like this, cannot openly talk about, or at least say the actual word. And the reason why we can't is because there's certain rules and bylaws on YouTube that there's certain words you can't say. And that's the thing about this in media, too. It's been the whole thing since the whole, the whole George Carlin incident about, was it like the 7 words you can't say on TV or radio? This sort of falls into that category as a word or a term that YouTube probably would not be open or not over the moon about you putting out there. So I can't say the actual term, but I can at least describe it, I guess, or at least vaguely describe it. But yes, it is that bad that you can't say it on YouTube. Or if you were to say it on YouTube, it'd be one of those situations where you get shadow banned, which is like unofficially being banned, but you're not really banned. But the algorithm makes it to where your stream is not easily able to see this. And you've seen this with a lot of podcasters, including guys like Joe Rogan. One of his interviews with a certain individual was that shadow banned, and it was hard to find, even though it was amassing millions of views. So that's to avoid all that. I'll be addressing the controversy, but I will be swimming around what the actual term is and whatnot. But anyway, so what ended up happening here, if you haven't seen it, Josh over at Den Nerds dropped a video this past Saturday, sort of describing what he had heard from the source. Again, I do believe it is the same source. Now, Josh, if you're listening to this, let me know if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is the same source that has given you information before a lot of the video last week. And what he was described was that something happens in Andor Season 2 involving the character of Bix, and it involves a situation with an Imperial officer, and it... How do I see this without actually going too far here? It's something very serious happens in a... I guess what I'm trying to say here is it involves something that is a very prominent legal issue in the real world. And it is something that has not been done in Star Wars that much. Now, look, I made statements about this on Twitter, and I made comments about this on Josh's video. I still stand by all that stuff. Now, look, I know a lot of you guys in the comments section were talking to me. Look, I have no problem with you guys talking to me in the comments. That's fine. I actually had a lot of fun talking to you guys. It's very, constructive, right? And a lot of you guys had your points about it, and you're saying, hey, this thing you're bringing in, it does sort of line up to what, certain things have happened in the books, especially in the EU. Apparently, it has been talked about before, but still, it's something I'm not going to say here on YouTube. But, a lot of folks are mentioning to me in the comments and the posts I made in the individual thread, people were saying, oh, it does fall in line with Star Wars, right? There's a lot of violence too, you bring up this vibe and how it goes against the vibe of Star Wars. What does that mean? Listen, look, I understand all that, and I mostly agree with you, right? And I think with Star Wars, and there is a lot of violence. War is in the title of the name of the franchise. I get all of that. And there's a lot of violence in there, and there's a lot of things that are, not necessarily, geared towards younger children. But what I agree with Josh here, and my problem with this, and the problem with introducing something that has a lot of legal substance to it, is that it does go against the vibe of Star Wars. And I think it does go against sort of what George was trying to say, and that what I think the big issue, at least I have, and I don't think Josh mentioned it too much in his video, which I'm kind of surprised about. It's not so much bringing up a social issue or bringing up something that is very important. Which, look, the issue that is going to be, supposedly will be happening in Andor Season 2, it is important. And it's something that, again, has a lot of legal substance, and it's something that, unless you've experienced it before, someone who has experienced it before, it's hard to explain. And I do agree with Josh in this. I just don't believe it's something that should be in Star Wars, and it should be at least addressed in this way. And I think what I'm getting at here is that what I think George Lucas, when he created Star Wars, he wanted it to be something that is a sort of an escape, how should I say this? To make it sort of like an escapism, right? To escape reality, right? To not bring too many things that were familiar to our real world. And I think bringing in this particular element sort of shatters that to a certain extent, to even more of a greater extent, because it is a legal thing. It's a thing that people can go to prison for. Without actually saying the actual word, it is something that, again, is very serious, and it, again, has a lot of legal ramifications in terms of the real world. Like, if you get accused of this or get caught doing this, like, your ass is getting sent to prison. Like, I don't know what else how to do to explain it without actually saying the word. So what I mean by Star Wars being an escapism from the real world is that what I think George tried to do when he created the original trilogy and original movies, and he made it to where everything in those movies, while yes, it's similar to things that have happened in the past, like in empires and stuff and more, it's far removed from what's happening current. So like having imperialism and stuff like that. Yes, well, that's still around. The way it's portrayed in the movies, it's somewhat far removed from what we view imperialism today, right? It's something that, at least in the classical sense, has not been around a long time. And, I think it worked, and I think it worked to a certain extent. And I think that's what George was trying to say when it's like a fairy tale for children, that we're not trying to interject, or he wasn't trying to interject things that were not socially relevant to today, into the real world. And I think if they are bringing this in to Andor, which again, I firmly believe they are, this completely shatters that mold, and it completely goes against what I think George is trying to do, is that you're introducing something that is not only controversial in the real world, and again, it has a lot of legal implications, and people who are accused of this or are caught doing this are sent to prison. This shatters the mold, and it just doesn't make sense to me, and it boggles the mind how they approved this, how this even got past the levels it needed to get approved by, and it just boggles the mind, man. And I can't believe they're actually probably going to be doing this, and I don't know. It just sucks. It really does suck, and I just don't. And again, I know a lot of you folks came to me in the comments in Josh's video and saying, hey, one person mentioned saying, hey, Andor's still going to win, 2,100 Emmys or whatever they said. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not denying the show visually from a, cinematic standpoint, from a production standpoint, is good. It is good. It's it is the let me stop there. It is the best well-made Star Wars show out of all the Disney Plus shows. I have no problem saying that. I don't disagree with you of that. I don't disagree that it's a well-made show. I don't disagree that people do like that. And look, if you like it, I have no problem with that. That's great. But you can say that, but I can also say, well, I got water from my fridge today. Like, cool. But that's still not addressing the issue that you are bringing in a relevant and socially relevant issue that is a legal issue that is so serious that I guarantee you, if this is indeed in the show, that they probably had to consult with lawyers on this. I have no doubt in my mind that the folks at Lucasfilm, Disney, with this, with them proving that, they probably had to when they were making the second season of Andor with this particular episode, or I guess string of episodes. It's not necessarily been dispelled if it's going to be a storyline and a string of episodes, because it's going to be 3 episodes like every single week. But they probably had to. It's so serious enough that they definitely had to consult lawyers on this, because it's a legal issue. And I said this on Twitter, and I also said this on the comments, and I still believe this. But I guarantee you, if this is in the actual show, and this is actually true, and I firmly believe it is, this is going to be talked about not only in Star Wars circles and like pop culture circles and media, like film circles, like people who cover this, like people like Christian Harloff and whatnot who cover this. It's not only going to be addressed in those circles, but it's also going to be addressed in circles that go beyond the film industry. Like it will probably be it won't be like the headline news, but it wouldn't surprise me if you see, these like talk shows on like CNN or MSNBC or PBS. Don't be surprised if it's one of those topics on those talk shows. Again, I know that sounds crazy, but trust me, it's a big enough issue. It's a big enough sort of bombshell moment in Star Wars. It's saying it's not something that we've really ever seen mentioned in the movies or shows before, that it will create headlines, no doubt. And it will be talked about on those type of shows, those newsworthy shows. And I just can't believe that's actually going to happen. Again, I know Josh in his video mentions that hopefully if more and more people talk about this, it will get out there. But I don't think it's going to happen, man. I think someone like Tony Gilroy and that current Lucasfilm administration, I think they're so steadfast on getting this out there. And I agree with Josh, right? And the person that he talked to the other day about this, that if there were to be a show or a show that we're going to dive into this, then it will be Andor. It would be Andor. And look, I'll still watch the shows and I'll have my opinions on the show as a whole. But this issue, the fact that they're introducing this legal thing into this show is a concern. And of course, a lot of people come back at me and look, whatever, fine. You guys can get mad at me all you want. But the folks who come at me and say, oh, well, they do this in other legal shows, what's wrong with Star Wars? Again, that's fine for legal shows. If it was a show on all of those, I don't know, like it's like Chicago Fire, whatever it's called, those shows on NBC that deal with like legal stuff and like police shows, that's fine for that. I don't care about that. But in Star Wars, that just doesn't translate to me. And that's something that, again, goes against what George originally set out to do when he made the original movies and the prequels, that it's a fairy tale for kids, and he did not want to interject current social issues into his stuff. Again, a lot of people will bring up to me, oh, but the wars and stuff and imperialism. Again, the way it's portrayed in Star Wars and the way it's, and the Empire and, the way the war is projected in Star Wars, it's somewhat far removed from real stuff, or at least relevant things. Now, you can make the argument for stuff in the prequels and how it does tie into the stuff after 9/11, whatever, fine. But again, just bringing in something like this that is so touchy, and a lot of folks who have been impacted by it. Look, most of us who don't know someone or are someone who has been through that, especially if you're a female, you don't understand that. Unless you know someone, or you are someone who's been through that, you don't understand what this topic is and the ramifications of it. But I'm just telling you, I have a major issue of this. A lot of folks have a big issue about this. I'm surprised that Lucasfilm, this has not gone as big as it should be, and I'm surprised that Lucasfilm hasn't put out a statement about this via the trades, because that's how they do it. They're probably not going to, and at least if I were them, I wouldn't address it. But I don't know, man. It just that whole situation rubbed me the whole wrong way. I thank Josh for bringing this up, and I think him doing this is pretty ballsy, and at least it's getting him out. I can check the video right now. I'm pretty sure it's got a lot of views. Let me check here. Did that video, because it was getting pretty popular a couple of days ago. Yeah, it's got 24,000 views, and that's going pretty quickly. So I do believe that people are becoming aware of this. I'm talking about it. I think I've seen other smaller channels talk about it. I don't think Star Wars Theory talked about it, but I don't know. Like I said, when this first got brought up and when Josh brought it up on Twitter, I'm like, come on, like, are you serious, man? Like, ugh. Like, not to mention too, they have Star Wars Celebration coming up in the end of the month. And look, if you want to talk about weird and awkward, and look, and I thought the Mandalorian season 3 stuff was weird. This is gonna be weird too. And again, the show's gonna premiere the same week, so it'll be after. But man, just being like someone like me and Josh and some of the other fans who are still fans of the product but are still keeping up with it but have their problems with it. This is just, I don't know what to say, man. That's the best way I can put it. Is just, it boggles the mind how this was even approved to be in the show. And from all accounts, it isn't a show, and I would probably assume it's still going to be in it. So, and look, I'm not advocating for it to be removed or anything like that, but in my own personal mind, it would be nice if they did remove it, because again, I do believe it goes against George's original sort of status quo, if you will, of the way he wanted the story of Star Wars to be and what the franchise was to be. But I don't know if any of this is making sense to you, but if you're a fan like me who still wants the brand to succeed, who's still keeping up with it, who's not totally, look, I'm not as bad as things as it has been for Star Wars and how bad it's been. I'm still going to be a fan. I'll still buy the merchandise. I'm a big Lego fan. I buy the Lego sets and whatnot. I still buy the merchandise and whatnot. And, I'm still invested in it. I'll still watch Ahsoka Season 2. I'll still, even though the Mandalorian movie has been getting a lot of, some of the leaks from that have been pretty bad, I'll probably still go watch it. I don't think the movie will be really that good. I'll still go watch whatever Filoni's movie will be. But I don't know, man. It just when this news came out, it just, like, you serious? Like, they're actually going to do this? And it hurts, man. It really does hurt. And I just really wish those folks over there. Look, as someone who's, and I'll end this segment here of this. We've been going. I think this segment's been going for over 20 minutes. As someone who is a PR, someone who's graduated with a PR degree, someone who understands general marketing, and I said this on Twitter, and I also said this when addressing. When commenting on Josh's video, the number one rule, and I was taught this by so many of my professors in school when I was in my undergrad, that the number one rule in marketing and PR is to understand your target audience. And from my point of view, and the point of view of a lot of folks who are fans of Star Wars, that the folks who are over at Lucasfilm just don't understand it. They do not understand the target audience. And I said this before, back a couple weeks ago, and I brought up the topic of, why is Andor so divisive? It's just the reason why it's so divisive. One of the reasons why people hate that show, and including to a certain extent me, is that it just doesn't understand the target audience. It's completely different and detached from what the core target audience is and what Star Wars is. And again, a lot of you folks get mad at me about it. A lot of you folks can get mad at Josh over Damn Nerds, but I completely agree with my stand with him on this issue that this is garbage. It's stupid. Again, I can't believe it actually got approved to be in the show. And look, I will also, and I'll actually end of this here. If it's on the show, great. If it's in the show, then whatever. There's nothing we can do about it. Hopefully they do listen to us. This does get more traction on it, that we can at least make a just make a statement about, hey, saying, hey, that we don't believe this should be in the show, and maybe they do remove it, but I don't know. Again, it sucks. It's sad that this has come to this, and I just wonder, much like Josh did on his video, why hasn't someone like Filoni, who again was around when George was still involved in the company, why hasn't he said anything about this? Why wasn't he able to stop this from getting approved? But then again, it is Tony Gilroy, and apparently him and Dave probably don't even talk to each other. So, even despite the fact that Dave is the CCO of the company, so okay, whatever. But nothing. Look, I'm just a YouTube channel. I'm just a guy from a microphone and a camera. So what do I know, right? Anyway, I'm gonna get some more water here, and then we have last big topic here. We'll get into some rapid fire Q&A, and then we'll wrap up the show. So as I mentioned at the beginning here, sort of wanted to touch into what are the big brands of college football. Again, like I mentioned earlier, with I think one of the things we forget, especially with covering college football, that we get a lot of new fans, right? Especially now with the college football video game being back, that we have a lot of new fans who have accessed college football, or at least been introduced to it via the video game, are now saying, "Oh, so there's a sport who where the guys in NFL where they came from, or most of them came from. Well, that's cool. I'm gonna check that out." So I think a lot of these new fans, if you are here, welcome, and make sure you subscribe to a show like this. That I thought it'd be a good idea just to cover what are the big brands in college football to someone who is new to the sport, or to someone who is being introduced to the sport for the first time. And I think this also serves a purpose to touch on two schools in particular that has been a topic of conversation of whether or not they actually are still big brands. But to go through these to an certain extent quickly, the big brands, of course, are Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida. Now, there's two others here. I'll get to those in just a second. The big ones here, I guess the ones in this group here, besides the other ones I wanted to talk about on their own, I guess the two ones that would get some question here are Michigan and probably Florida and Oklahoma. The Michigan one is easier to explain. Yes, they're the winningest program in college football. Yes, were things a little bit rocky, with the Jim Harbaugh era, even though they were improving, despite the fact they were horrible under Rich Rod and Brady Hoke to a certain extent. But Michigan's a big brand. They have a big alumni base. It's one of those brands when you think of Big Ten football, it's Michigan, Ohio State. Penn State's there to a certain extent, but a general fan, or at least a fan who's new here, would probably associate Ohio State and Michigan being the leading bands in the Big Ten. And I guess you could throw Oregon in there too, but Oregon hasn't had the sustainable success as in Ohio State, Michigan, and several, I guess, portions of their history. But Oregon's catching up there. They're getting close, I guess. They're on the tier below. Like they're doing this in tiers in terms of brands. This would probably be tier one. I think tier two would be like your Oregons, Auburns, Texas A&Ms of the world, sort of those. But the Michigan one's easier to explain. Oklahoma, kind of the same thing. But since they're in the SEC now and not in the Big 12, I think you think of them as a Big 12 brand. You still think of them that way because they weren't in the Big 12 for most of my lifetime and up until last year. So they're still a big brand. Again, large alumni base. They've had a lot of success and the multiple Heisman Trophy winners, appearances in the playoff, a lot of big wins. Let's see here, another one. Florida is another one. Even though they've been bad lately, again, they're still a big brand. And when you think of the SEC, you think of Bama, Georgia, and Florida. At least traditional brands. And the new brands like Texas and Oklahoma are thrown in there as well. But the traditional brands have been there for most of my lifetime are those three: Georgia, Bama, Florida. Those are your sort of big three. And I think Florida still fits there, even though they've been struggling recently with Billy Napier and having to go through so many coaches in the past 10 years. They're still a good brand. The program, or at least the individual eras of these coaches, not been that good, but the brand's still good. Like the brand's still, it's not going anywhere. Like what, Florida's gonna fall off the face of the cliff? Like what? They're the Florida brand in general. If you're going to go 50,000 foot, I mean, hell, they just won the college basketball national title last night. Like, you don't think the brand's still big enough? Of course it is. Of course it's still a big brand. Even outside the state of Florida, where I live right now. Now, the two ones that are the ones I get questions about, or at least I've seen questions about the most, is USC and Miami. Both of these brands, at least right now, are very similar. They're not totally relevant. They have not won a national title in the past 20 years. They've had multiple losing seasons. They've had multiple coaching changes over the past 5 years or so. Despite all of that, again, much like Florida, they're still big brands. They still have big alumni space. Like, think about this. Like, someone who earned a degree from USC probably lives on the East Coast or lives anywhere, right? In these big cities, Atlanta, Nashville, Indianapolis, Dallas, Austin, Texas, New Orleans, like any of those cities I just mentioned, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, any of those cities, they have there's USC alumni there. And there's a lot of fans out there. And I think the brand of USC, what you think of USC, what they could be, and of course, with Lincoln Riley being there, it's not been a smooth transition. It's gone worse every single year. Then again, progress, most of the extent is not always linear. USC to me is still a big brand. I mean, when you think of USC, you still think of the days when they were consistently good. The Pete Carroll years, Reggie Bush, Troy Polamalu, or he may have been before him, but like Reggie Bush, Lindell White, Matt Leinart, Carson Palmer, all of these great players. I mean, you think of recently of Caleb Williams and Sam Darnold, even with Clay Helton. Like those are spurts of success, but not been sustained recently. It doesn't always have to be like that. They can certainly be good again, but USC, in terms of their alumni base, reach, what you think of them, especially when you bring up West Coast football, USC is always the first one you bring up. And then after that, it's Oregon and then some of the others. And then Miami's the same way. Actually, both of USC and Miami, I guess one thing they do have in common is that they are both in big market cities and cities that are both, a lot of sense very similar. Miami, in a lot of senses, is sort of the East Coast version of Los Angeles. Both of these cities have NBA fan bases. Both of them also have pretty sizable NFL fan bases. One of them has two teams. The other has one. It's difficult to compete with that because, of course, the NBA and NFL are going to generate more fan base. Of course it is. But the alumni base, I will say this, is a lot larger because you have more people who have went to that school versus people who cheer for those teams. As, a team or fans or go away or, people can stop being fans of those teams and people who are alumni of those schools. Because, someone can't take away your college degree unless something unforeseen happens. But, yes, USC and Miami are still big brands. Even though they may not be good right now or have not been consistently good, they still have a massive alumni base. They still have a lot of history tied towards them. They can still be successful in the future for years to come, especially with, USC being the Big Ten now. They're in a bigger conference. Miami, at some point, too, when the ACC eventually, unfortunately, will fall apart, they too will be in a better, more stable conference in the future. So again, if you're a new fan to college football, you can welcome in. But if you're looking at, if you're new here and you're like, man, what are the big brands? Well, I just listed them. Texas, Bama, Ohio State, Michigan, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida, USC, Miami. I know if you're a more seasoned veteran fan like me, maybe thinking, well, duh, that's obvious. But again, I think a lot of folks forget. There's a lot of new fans that come in, a lot of folks who don't, totally understand that, yes, USC, Florida, Oklahoma, Miami are big brands too, not just the other ones. But, I think it's good to do a segment like this once in a while, especially like a show like us. But we won't be doing a segment like that every single year. It'll be like an every few years type of thing. But, yeah, those are big brands right now. And, yes, I do believe USC and Miami are big brands. Duh, of course they are. I mean, go look at that was not born when Miami and mostly USC were having their success. But I think when we talk to someone who was around during that era, when they were watching, those Miami teams play those Notre Dame teams and, them winning all those national titles with, the head coaches would change, but the national titles will still come. People hated Miami. People hated USC. You don't get that anymore, but they hate them because, they're South Florida or vice versa, West Coast mentality. But people don't fear Miami or USC because they have not been either recruiting well enough or keeping in-state talent, or they've not been winning enough. And that coincides with both, or in the extent they've not been hiring well enough. They've been making so many dopey hires that I feel like they finally now, especially Miami, I think they finally got their coaching crystal ball. They should have Lincoln Riley. I think they do, contrary to popular belief. I think he is making changes out there, and I think this year you could see some improvement. I want them to be good. Shamefully, anytime, and ironically, that's our first rapid fire question. And the college football video game, I always make it apparent to make USC good and to make Miami good because I like that. I like them to be good. Now, it's not required for the sport to be good, but it's programs that at least I just feel like college football to me feels more. I don't know, it just has a different feel to it when USC and Miami are just having success. And if you look at old footage on YouTube of the 05, 06, 07 Miami teams or the early 2000s, 90s Miami teams, just a different vibe to it. Just different vibe. And I really wish that was around. Of course, it helps too when Miami hopefully will eventually have an actual on-campus stadium at some point, not playing at Hard Rock. But speaking of College Bowl 20, not 25, but the next college football video game, got some rapid fire. The rapid fire Q&A, easy for me to say. Q&A here, and it's more water here, real quick, and then we will wrap up the show. Okay, so rapid fire Q&A here and wrap up the show. First question here: what would be my Q&A? I'm doing a Q&A. What would be my College Football 25 EA Sports College Football 25 wish list? Of course, as most of you know, hopefully by now, that College Football 25 has been around for about more than 6 months. It's been around for almost a year now. It's a good game. I've already done my review on it in the past. I think it's a good game. Is it flawed? Yes. Can it be improved upon? Yes. And I'll get into that here in my wish list. It's not everything I want, but just some things I have listed here in terms of what I want for College Football 26. Of course, the cover leaked a couple of weeks ago, and of course that sort of confirmed that our real coaches will be in the game. So that's something I'm not going to bring up here because we know it's coming. But in terms of things that we don't know for sure are coming, but we'd at least like them to be. A lot of this sort of deals with Dynasty mode because that's what I play most of the time. I don't really play Road to Glory. I play some Play Now stuff if I'm bored enough on like a Tuesday in the evening. Maybe I do like a random college ball playoff run through, I guess. I choose a team and I do it, whatever. But here's my wish list here. And again, it's not an exhaustive list. These can obviously change. But as of right now, here are the things that I want to be in this year's game. First one, more player editing and custom players. This is an issue back when the game came out. A lot of this does unfortunately tie into, NIL and rules and regulations and stuff like that with legal stuff. College football not having a player union unlike the NFL, where if college football did have a player union, then player editing of real players and creating fictional players would be an issue. It'd be same with Madden. It'd be a free for all. You do whatever you want. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Now, hopefully, with everybody being able to, with players actually being able to sign up and be in the game, and I'm sure that's going to be starting up either right now or soon. Players opting into the game and getting their names in there. That hopefully that means we'll be able to customize players or at least make custom players. And look, if VA doesn't want us to edit the real players, that's fine. There's really no reason to edit them because they're real players, not like the old game where we had to download the rosters and stuff, or like me individually editing the players to the current college football, at least to a certain extent. But more editing players, customization. They did let us, and they gave us a bone of editing the custom recruits in Dynasty mode. As you go further and further in, you start to get the AI generated custom players. You can edit those players basically 100%, except for the skin tone and whatnot and the hair stuff, which is kind of strange. They don't let you do that yet. Hopefully next year they will. But they throw us a bone and let us edit the attributes and the players and how tall they are and what their names are and whatnot. So hopefully for the list, do that because it is kind of cool to do that. Be able to edit the rosters in the future and edit the recruits when they come into your school and even afterwards when they're actually on the rosters at that point. Number one, customizing the playoff. Again, as someone who's not a fan of the expanded playoff and would like to go back to a 14 playoff, especially in the video game and also in real life. I mean, we can't do that in real life. But if you can't do it in the video game, it would be cool. Now, I believe off the top of my head that when ESPN put out one of their articles about this game, that they did mention a customizing the playoff attribute would be in the game. It didn't happen. I think the part of the reason why it didn't happen is I think it was a legal issue with the playoff committee. And supposedly, and it's the rumors I've been confirmed, I don't think, that the playoff organization wanted the playoff to be representative of what the playoff is in real life instead of having players customizing it. So that to me leads me to believe this will be a future or at least a customizable thing in the game going forward. But hopefully it will be able to. hopefully they back off on that because the format's changing anyway. So like, like for example, when you start a dynasty up today, on whatever console you have, after this past season and this upcoming season 2026, the playoff format at that point in the game, once you get into a dynasty mode, it's not accurate because this 12-team playoff model is going away next year. Right? That's it would be nice to at least customize it. I know for legal reasons and the the courtesy of making things accurate to real life. Unfortunately, if you can't do it in the current game, and probably not for future games, it would be nice. EA would be nice. College football playoff organization to let us edit it. It would be cool. One can dream. Another one, a better and more reasonable coaching carousel, coaching market. And this is one of the things I had an issue of Dynasty mode where back in the old game, it was easy, I will say, to get a coaching job. But in the new game, in College Football 25, they've made it so hard for you to get a job. Like, even if you're a coach at, like, I don't know, whatever school, custom or real team, that it's just, I don't know. It's like you'd imagine that you'd be getting offers from several schools to be your head coach, but and then in the case it's not, and you get like random coordinator job hires, and even though you're an offensive-minded coach, anyway, it's just hopefully they make it a little bit different. They sort of changed it up a little bit because, for example, in my personal experience, Dynasty Files, I'll be a head coach at, I don't know, pick a school, Cincinnati, right? Won my multiple national titles, where I'm having success, and even though I'm an offensive-minded coach, and that's what I specialize mostly, they make it to where my coach is getting defensive coordinator jobs, even though my coach is I'm not a coordinator. It's everything too for coaching. I guess coaching in terms of creating a coach would be nice to differentiate, or at least to have your archetype be specific into like what type of coach you actually are. If you're are you a offensive-minded coach or defensive-minded coach? It doesn't matter you have this, but in college football, it's just your generic archetype instead of having just what your specific coach is in terms of I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is I would like there to be, instead of along with archetypes, but just what your coach is good in terms of that side of the football. Are they a defensive coach, offensive coach? That would be nice to at least have that in the game to sort of make that a pair or make that a part of like the coaching part of it. Because again, the coaching carousel, if you're getting offers to be a DC, but you're clearly a offensive-minded coach, like it doesn't make any sense. So hopefully they introduce that in the new game, or at least update the coaching carousel. Adding a second transfer window would help in the game. It's currently one, which is during the fall, but there's technically supposed to be two. So it would be nice, especially when in Dynasty mode, when you get to the when you get to the early signing day, which is cool to actually have that in the game. It would be nice to have the early signing day, and when you get to that slide, to have an initial transfer window, and have one after season is over, which the one in the game currently is the spring one. But part of that's too because they were making the game before the second transfer window was a thing. So that's part of it. But hopefully in this next year's game we'll have two transfer windows because it would make it accurate, because right now it's not technically accurate. Number one, letting us schedule games, kickoff times in Dynasty mode. Please let us do that, EA. It's stupid that whenever you get a game of the week, I'm not asking us to choose the game of the week. It's obviously the game should choose it for us. Like a coach can't choose that. But it would be nice to have the user at least schedule the game, like choose the time for it, because I've had several instances where I've had a 1 versus 2 matchup in my Dynasty file, but the game kicks off at 12 o'clock in the morning, or 12 o'clock in the morning, 12 o'clock p.m. It's like the game currently would not be kicking off at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. It'll be kicking off at 8 o'clock. So please let us do that. And also, I guess by extension, let us actually, make let us pick specific theme games, like choose a whiteout, blackout thing, especially if it's a custom team builders team. That'd be cool. Number one is another thing I would like to see is a proper trophy room or a college football history tab. The one thing I do like about Madden, the recent Maddens, and also something I've seen in 2K is the league history. Now, of course, you can't call it league history because it's not a league. I guess CFP history, just being able to see past seasons and go through, say, hey, who was the Heisman Trophy winner this year? Who won the national title this year? Who, won this award and whatever. It would be nice to see all that. Another one to also include is, believe it or not, this was something that you could do in the old game, is let us view coaching contracts for other coaches in the game just to see how other teams have progressed for the Dynasty file. You could do it in an old game. You could go into, the coaching info tab, and it's in the current game, but in the current game, you can't look at the coaching contract, at least to like the bar graph screen. You can see how, your team's doing. You could do that in the old game. We can click on a coach and see their history in terms of like the school, I guess their school's history. You can't do that in the current game. You can only see their overall record and whatnot. And it'd be nice to see that, just to see how their other schools have been progressing versus your school. It'd be cool to compare that. But unfortunately, you can't do that. Another one is formation subs. That's something that was for some reason left out for some reason, but EA is supposedly working to fix that. I don't know why they didn't address it for some reason. And then the last one, much like the viewing of our coaches' contracts, is another one I would like to see in the game. Well, was in the old game, is being able to play and watch other games in a Dynasty file that are not involving your team. Like, for example, if I were to start a Dynasty file in say 14 hour to pick out a Mississippi State, when I get to the actual season, when you're starting the season and actually playing the games, when you go to the scores and schedule tabs, I think that's what it is. In the old game, it was called that, I believe, and it is, the same thing in the new game. In the old game, in that tab, when you go to the scores and schedules, you could click and actually have an option to actually play that game. Like if it was Mississippi, if I was coaching Mississippi State, but I'd go into that tab and maybe I wanted to see what the games are and actually watch those big games. Like, for example, if it was Florida State versus Clemson, maybe it was like a top 5 match, and maybe I want to watch that game or even play it. Maybe I want to see what those players look like, and I don't know, just a curiosity, right? In the sandbox, format. Maybe I want to, pull off an upset, have my team, I guess. That's something I'll do in the old game. That's just weird. That's something that's small, was not in this game. Maybe it is the sort of consequence of it being they're restarting the game, and there's not have to meet a certain deadline. There's certain things they couldn't put in this game that they were in the past games. And that, look, I know the folks at EA care. I know the folks, at least on that team, care, and they're fans of the game. They also, they're well reported that they brought in guys from the college ball revamp, and they were the guys who sort of modified the old game, making it, sort of plussing it a little bit, making it sort of, what if the game was still being released and whatnot. And those guys are obviously college ball nerds. They understand college ball. They understand the video game. That's what makes me hopeful that this year's game, College Ball 26, if they add in these things you're not mentioning, will make this game on par with NCAA 14. The current game is good. Again, the current game is pretty good. College Ball 25 is good. In the words of Josh P, they definitely took care of us. But there's room for improvement. It's flawed. There's no doubt. It's a flawed game. But I think those things alone in Dynasty mode, again, it's at least a mode I play a lot, doing all those things, even just some of them, doesn't have to be all of it, right? You don't have to look. They can't let you customize players or all of them. You can't let you customize the playoff. They can't change the coach, or they don't want to change the coaching, the carousel thing, whatever. Fine. But if you just add in a college ball history tab, or at least let us play in a Dynasty mode all of the games in a given week, or at least do that or watch them, because that was the thing I love doing. I love being able to play the other big games of the day, or at the very least just watching them, right? And I think it'd be cool to at least watch them or actually play them, because it'd be kind of cool, right, to actually go in there and, maybe you really wanted to, create some chaos in your Dynasty file and whatnot, instead of like going through, at least what I do, and like going through and, force winning for certain teams so I can make like certain teams and make it realistic. Like I would do it for like Bama, Georgia, and all of the big brands, just to make it more realistic. But just being able to give us the option to go into different games that are not it's not your team, but go to different games involving your team and actually playing those games. I at least like that. It's just something that would be cool for you to do that. And also another thing I didn't add in is like some other quality of life things, like making the tabs a little bit easier, and making the Heisman Trophy tab having the actual stats and information on the actual player and whatnot. So it would be nice to see that. But again, knowing the folks at EA, they clearly do listen. It's obvious throughout the updates they were giving throughout the season, because they're done now. They're not really changing the game now. It's irrelevant because the new game's coming out soon. they listen to you and they listen to us, and I think they do realize there are things. At least this is me thinking this or hoping this, that hopefully they realize there were things that were left out of this game because of deadlines or the fact that it's a brand new game from scratch. That I almost hope, I guess I hope that there were probably things like this I just mentioned that they wanted to they wanted to add, but they couldn't add it in because they the deadline and stuff, and it's a whole new game. So hopefully they add that stuff in at some point. One little question here. Actually, I'm actually going to take off that question I had about Lane Kiffin. Hopefully I'll save that for Thursday's show. Because we're running we're going pretty long here, but we have enough time here, so who knows? Maybe we'll get to it or not. Probably not. Next question here. I'm going to get through these pretty quickly here. Thoughts on Thunderbolts possibly being a box office bomb? This is something that has been sort of percolating throughout Marvel Twitter lately. A lot of the big personalities like Josh over at Denver has brought it up. Has brought it up. He brought it up today on the stream. He's actually going to do, I think, release a video at some point too, talking about this. That the numbers, at least for the projections based on the ticket sales. By the way, the tickets went on sale yesterday. That looks not looking too good. I think a lot of folks are worried that this might be one of Marvel's better movies recently. That's what it seems like from the reactions we're getting. The ticket sales and the projections are even worse than Captain America: Brave New World. That's concerning. Now, at least concerning if you're someone at Disney or in the marketing department and whatnot. It's concerning for you, and as a fan, it doesn't matter to us. It's like we're not reaping the rewards of that stuff. But is it concerning if you're putting on your business cap or your marketing cap or your public relations cap? Yeah, it is hurt and it's concerning. And I think those folks there are not happy about that. I'm sure the projections, and I wonder internally, are they similar to the fact that her not tracking very well? Look, if the movie's good, the movie's good. Hopefully, word of mouth will be a lot better. Hopefully, the Rotten Tomatoes scores, like maybe in the 80s or 70s, and that should go better. And maybe people are, get it, second glance at it and go, maybe I should go check out Thunderbolts. It's actually getting good reviews. And another thing, too, and this is something that Josh has mentioned, something that Jeff Snyder has mentioned on him and John Roach's podcast, that Marvel, to a certain extent, has really struggled how to market this movie because they've done like the A24 style marketing. They've done the traditional Marvel style marketing. It just the only way I can really explain it is that it almost seems like, even without it being reported, you can sort of tell they're really struggling to really market this thing because they know that there's things in this movie that will connect to Doomsday. That's obvious because they literally sort of spoiled the movie in the that stupid chairs thing last week or a couple weeks ago now. That's part of it too. That also was part of the marketing. The reason why they went ahead and just spoiled the movie because they're like, or at least including the actors and actresses who are in Thunderbolts and will be in Doomsday, is part of the fact that they are struggling to market this movie, and this is planning to roll in the box office projections and it potentially bombing hard. Not much joy in saying that, but yeah, that's as someone who has a degree in communication, as someone who has been behind the scenes of a lot of marketing and stuff and social media and whatnot. If you're putting that cap on, yeah, it's concerning. Yeah, it sucks. If you're a Marvel fan, if you're someone who is just a casual fan, or even just a hardcore Marvel fan, I wouldn't worry about it too much because, again, you're not the one who's reaping these rewards. But if you're someone over there at that Marvel in general, this is, a little long for Marvel. It's in a bad week, too. They had CinemaCon last week. They completely get hosed by not only the Superman trailer, but even the Naked Gun movie because of a joke of O.J. Simpson. It's like, man, I know it's not a topic in the actual show, but man, like Marvel last week, especially after CinemaCon, it's like, man, they were a little rough week for them. It's not looking too good either this week too, because based on some of these projections. See here, next question here, and then we'll wrap up the show because we've been going for a long time. Has the Florida national title they won last night and the SEC success and the NCAA tournament damaged the SEC bias argument in college football? I've seen this around a little bit, and Josh poked at it yesterday of Danny Cannell. If the scene from Titanic with the captain, when he's still on the bridge of the ship as it's sinking and the water busts through the windows and he dies. I've seen a lot of conversation about this SEC hate bias, and a lot of folks don't like the SEC, and people are wondering, did Florida and the success, the conference had this year, getting teams in the tournament, did this sort of, cool the temperature a little bit in terms of the hate. I don't think it did necessarily. You're still going to have folks troll them and say, hey, not everyone made it to the national title. There's only one team that made it. Well, duh. I mean, only one team in the national title. SEC and bias in general, do I believe it exists? Yes, it exists. I do believe it's annoying to a certain extent. I actually believe it or not, to a certain extent, agree with Danny Cannell that it is annoying. It is, and of course, go back to the Florida State snub a couple years ago. Clearly, sort of an SEC bias there. I mean, look, it's clearly there. Of course, they're the best conference in America, but isn't it annoying? Yes, it is annoying. Isn't it annoying when you have Greg Sankey on, College Game Day back a couple years ago, and he's doing the, one of these things, not like the other, when they're doing the playoff segment, and you have Boo Corrigan, who is a NC State athletic director, a representative of the ACC, on that Selection Sunday show. I remember this vividly, him having googly-eyed when Reese Davis is asking him those questions about Florida State. And of course, you also have the ACC commissioner, also, just kind of completely ignoring the whole fact that his conference is complete garbage, and they're clearly not viewed as such as a major power by both the playoff committee and other conferences. So there's that. Not even, let alone members of your own conference don't believe in you. But yeah, has the national title stuff. And congratulations to Florida. We're not a college basketball show, but congrats. It was a good game, by the way, too. Very good game. Very, very entertaining. Congrats to them. Of course, living in Jacksonville, we're not too far away from the Florida campus, if you will, in Gainesville. I know a lot of folks personally who are UF grads. And has it sort of hampered the whole SEC bias argument, because the SEC does have another national title? I mean, look, the SEC bias thing, it's not going to go away. It's going to be a thing for a long time. Do I care? Do I care about it enough to talk about it every single day? No. Do I think it's an annoying thing? Yeah, I think it's annoying. I think it's certainly getting a little bit old, but I don't think it's calmed it down at all. I still think guys like Danny Cannell and those type of people, up to someone, including me and some folks I know personally, we're not going to stop talking about it. We're going to stop, bringing up the Florida State snub and whatnot, and how that was clearly somewhat SEC bias and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, that's not going to go away. Yes, the SEC, again, it's the best conference in America. Them and the Big Ten, to a certain extent, are hijacking the sport. It also doesn't help either when both of them, especially the SEC, is really taking control of the sport, it feels like, and obviously they are. But, it's not going away, but it's certainly, I guess you can make the argument, it does cool down just a little bit, that a lot of folks who are arguing against the SEC are shut up right now, but it's going to come back, trust me. By the time you get to magazine cover season and, preseason projections and stuff like that, of course they're going to have more people bringing it up, but it's never going away. Of course it's not going away. This Lane Kiffin question, we'll save this for the Thursday show because it's an interesting question. But we've been going for almost an hour and 30 minutes here, so I am going to log off here and enjoy the rest of my day and get the podcast uploaded hopefully by tomorrow. We'll, of course, have a show on Thursday. Until then, until our show Tuesday, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, Wednesday. Take care, and we'll see you guys on Tuesday. Thursday. So take care, folks.